Hello everyone. It seems to me that there's a lot of misconception on exactly how combat as an Explosher works, what kind of things it's good against, and what exactly you should be doing in combat situations. So, I'm going to make a bit of a video here, going over it, and just discussing a few options and scenarios for Explosher, and exactly what you should be doing to try to mitigate the slowness of the weapon and how to improve your combat. So, let's get into it. So, one of the first things I want to point out is, say you're fighting a shooter or a blaster or someone who's trying to rush you down. Now, what a lot of Exploshers will try to do, or people in general, is try to hit directly at your opponent. What you want to do with the Exploser is try to land directly in front of them, about here. Because of the massive amount of ink that gets put on there, it's going to make it really hard for them to approach, as you actually get hit pretty hard with a movement penalty for getting hit by Explosher. On top of this, if they move forward, they will get hit with the direct indirect and take even more damage. However, slowing them down makes it really easy to follow up with the killing shot. And if they move forward into the shot, it's even easier to kill them, as you just need to hit an indirect. Also, when you're moving backward, you can always just jump and move backward. Explosher has no penalty for jumping in terms of accuracy, so it actually gives you a little bit more range to be jumping than if I were to be sloshing normally. As you can see here, this is a slosh, this is a jump slosh, a little bit more range. So it makes it easier for me to hit my opponents, especially if you're going with forward momentum. It can allow you to have a lot more range than it would seem. But you want to try to hit in front of your opponent, try to stop their approach. Now, if opponents are rushing you directly and they're pretty far away, you can even slosh directly up, and if they run into you, you can slosh at the ground immediately in order to get a quick kill. So say someone's rushing me down here, training room is bad, I can do that. And that could help with approaches. You want to try to follow up with the direct and indirect. If you're stuck in close quarters combat with something that requires a lot of accuracy, say something like a blaster or umbrella, getting up next to it can actually be pretty nice for Explosher, because it's very hard to actually miss your opponent with this thing. It's very easy to just kind of dip and dive around and hit it with the outside hit, and then follow up with the direct indirect for a quick kill. So against something like Blaster, going up in its face and just making yourself really hard to hit can be pretty nice. Combining this with a little bit of swim speed up, and can actually be pretty difficult to hit an Explosher in the face, because the Explosher doesn't really have to worry about hitting the opponent. And it can get an indirect one, slow down the opponent's movement options and keep them stuck in place. And then all the Blaster can do, or umbrella, is try to hit a direct, which is pretty horrible for it. And one of the reasons the rapid matchup is such hell is because close quarters combat and long range is so great for Explosher against that weapon. Now, you do want to make sure you keep your movement mixed up, so don't always go for the same kind of movement. Maybe go to the side, one side, and if you have the option, retreating backward is never a bad thing, really. So being able to keep your distance is pretty important. One thing I do want to cover is opponents on grading or inkjets or splashdowns. If they are next to a wall, you shouldn't be too afraid to challenge them, because you can just tick damage off the wall to kill them. But if you are fighting, say, an inkjet in the air, you want to try to predict where they will go and slosh at them. That's why my Explosher shots can seem a little bit weird against inkjets. Because the shot velocity is so slow, you have to aim where they're going. So try to look at them and figure out where they're going to move. It's still tricky because you need to land 2 sloshes, but once you get a bit used to how inkjet moves and how the momentum works, it's not too bad to actually hit it. It's more landing 2 shots in a row that's the tricky part. But instead of hitting where it is, you want to try to think about where the inkjet is moving and try to hit that. Now, something important to point out is bubbles actually come out a lot faster after an Explosher shot. Normally you'd think you have to go through the full end lag and at this point be able to pop bubbles, but you can actually cancel the end lag entirely with your bubbles. While you can't do another slosh immediately after because you have to throw the bubbles, you can immediately put this up as a shield. So say someone's rushing you, you use a slosh, immediately pop bubbles and put it in front of them to block them, and try to use that to escape, put pressure, etc. The bubbles are actually a really nice close quarters combat tool for Explosher because it cancels all that end lag, which could really help in some situations. Don't panic them all the time, but if someone's rushing you head on or has a really linear angle towards you, it could be really useful to actually stuff their approach, as the bubble hitbox comes out extremely fast and will block you even with no special power-up. So it can be pretty useful. Another thing to note is sprinkler tick damage. While it's pretty rare, one hit from a sprinkler leads to a one-shot from Explosher. And this goes for staying an enemy ink too. If an opponent's weak to any extent, you want to follow it up with the actual Explosher itself. Keep in mind, like, if your sprinkler actually hits something, or if someone steps in enemy ink, and be aware this does mean you can one-shot them. Any sort of damage will really allow you to get a very quick kill with the one-shot of Explosher, but you need to be very aware of that. The last thing I want to cover is using objects, which is something I don't see Exploshers doing the most, which is you can really just hide behind shit and slosh, and it can be really hard to hit you. You can right peek really effectively because it's not hard to actually hit your opponents from behind a wall. You can abuse angles pretty heavily with this thing. So, like, say if I have a Brella user right here with the sprinkler it's pretty easy for me to, like, not even poke out all the way and slosh at them and indirect them. Well, it's very difficult for them to hit me from where they're standing. So you can really abuse objects and actually hit indirects from a solid distance without fully exposing yourself. So peeking is really strong with this weapon. That's about all I wanted to cover. I hope this gives a bit of insight on some options for Explosher, and I will have a full guide linked in the description just a little bit as I'm posting it right as this video goes up. So, I hope you guys enjoy, and hey, let me know what you want to see for more, and I will see you all in another video. Bye-bye.